That's a great question. Thank you, Veronica. Learn how much of your story should you share in order to engage and inspire your staff. That's wonderful. During home presentations, sure, sure. Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, thank you, Jose. Yeah, I will get to that. There are different ways, and in completely different environments. I'm starting early, but I will hold
It's
off.
okay. You know what? Let's go ahead and kick it off. We might as well. I think we're here, and if people join, then they join in the middle. So, I just want to introduce the session. Again, the title's Engage and Inspire: The Power of Your Story. The art of storytelling really comes down to delivering the right parts of the right stories to the right audience. Audience is always important. We all know that. In this discussion, we'll examine a process that you can use to elevate the impact of your messaging. You'll have a better understanding of how to meet the needs of your audience by asking them the right questions, structure your stories to captivate your audience, and identify what's needed and remove what's just nice to know. Whether it's the moment that changed your life or the heritage of your brand, you have a unique story to share, and the world needs your voice. And just to introduce Kevin, I know that you all see him on screen right now, but a little background on Kevin: his entire life has been about telling stories. Whether he was on stage or in a conference room, he spent nearly 3 decades connecting thoughts, ideas, and emotions with audiences of all different sizes. As a creative director, he's told visual and data stories for Fortune 500 companies. And on the theatrical stage, he's performed for thousands on a national tour and composed a score for 2 produced musicals. These combined experiences inform his somewhat unique perspective when it comes to telling stories. So, Kevin, I'm going to throw it over to you, and I will pop back on at the end of the session. Thanks so much.
Wonderful, and thank you so much, Jackie. You've been here all these 3 days, and it's been great. And I've been to some of the other sessions, and I'm excited to talk and share my little piece of this. But I've enjoyed the social media session, SBA yesterday, caught the design thinking session yesterday. It was fantastic. So thank you, Better Business, just for putting on such a wonderful summit. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate even the people who are have already asked questions. Up front, we have Veronica and Jose looking about how we can use their story, how to inspire their staff, how to engage customers during home presentations. Because yeah, it's tough with virtual. It's a little bit different. But what I find is that a lot of people don't even know why stories matter, and they're not even sure they have a story to tell. What I want to say is yes, you absolutely do have a story to tell, and your unique perspective makes you the only person who can tell that story. So, Veronica, when you're looking to lead your staff, it's what you bring to the table. You lead with empathy, a level of empathy. I'm sure you've probably heard that before. But understanding what they need and listening to them. So the great leaders spend a lot of time listening and hearing their stories and understanding how they can fit in to the picture of your vision for the business and where you want to go. I know when I was doing a creative directing thing, I lost. I would always ask, what is your process? What do you want to do? And I would fit that process into our overall vision. But I digress. Stories are important because someone in the world is in a hole. There's a picture of a guy in a hole right now. And someone in this world is in that hole. And the walls are so high and too high to get out. And I sometimes tell the story of how a doctor walks by and the guy down in the hole says, "Doc, yeah, I'm stuck down here. Can you help me out?" The doctor writes a prescription, throws it down in the hole, and he moves on. Then, a priest walks by and the guy says, "Hey, Father, I'm stuck down here. Can you help me out?" He writes a prayer, throws it down in the hole, and then he moves on. And then a friend walks by. He says, "Hey, Joe, it's me. I'm down here. Can you help me out?" And the friend jumps down in the hole. He says, "Joe, what are you doing here? You crazy? Now we're both stuck down here." And Joe says, "Yeah, but I've been down here before, and I know the way out." And what happens is he told his story. He jumped down in, and he knows the way out, and you know the way out. There's been challenges in your life that you have faced, and you have come through on the other side. and you know the way out for somebody who may be down in that hole right now. So by the simple act of sharing your experience, sharing your voice, your unique perspective, you're going to help someone who you may know, who may work for you, who maybe you've never even met, get through that one point. You're not going to give them all of the answers, but get through that one point in their life. And I talk about the emotional cycle of change. These two guys in the 70s, Don Kelly and Daryl Conner, came up with it. And this, just sort of keeping this in my mind, helps me through things. I just finished a user interface project, for example. I got it in September. I booked it and I was really excited. And that was uninformed optimism. Wow, I got this great job, this big job. It's going to take me a long time. It's going to be really hard, but I got it and I booked it and I charged what I was worth and I was super happy. And then I started doing it and I got into informed pessimism a little bit. And I went, poop, man, I really got into something. I don't know what I'm doing. It's going to be harder than I thought. But, I don't know, this part's going to be really difficult and I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. But I think I'm going to still, struggle through and get through it. And then you hit the valley of despair. And that's when you're down in the hole. You don't know which way is up. It feels like all the walls are just way too high. And that's where, our character was in the story I just told. But then there's a moment. You get a break. Something happens. That one little piece of information, that one little inspiration hits, and you move and you say, all right, well, now I can see the light. I can see the surface. I'm on my way back up, and I enter into something called informed optimism. And finally, you find success. You find the level of change. And that's the arc that you take when you go on these stories. How it applies to business, it's about telling the right parts of the right story to the right audience. I mentioned I was a creative director. I worked in the market research industry for about 20 years. And I started off as a presentation specialist. I moved up to a multimedia designer. So I was editing videos and doing a little bit of web design and some other things as well, in addition to doing presentations. And then I spent the last 5 years or so as a creative director managing a small global team. And we were doing a study, and it was for this app, and this rather ubiquitous app that everybody used. And they were located in the US. And the deliverable they wanted was this big poster. It was an international study, 26 countries. They wanted a big poster of all the findings. So when we found out what people were doing while they were using this app, they could hang that in the marketing department. And the marketing team could look and say, hey, that's our user. That's who we're marketing to, and have a daily reminder of it. And it was fantastic. And it's a good idea to have something like that in front of you every single day, to know who you're talking to know your audience. Very important. About halfway through the study, though, we found out that the cultures and the activities from country to country varied significantly. So much so that instead of doing one poster for the entire world, we wound up needing to do 26 posters for 26 marketing teams for 26 audiences. And the result was that each individual audience felt like this company, this application, was speaking directly to them. They felt seen. They felt like this company was solving their problems and answering their questions and meeting their needs before they even knew they needed something. So when we talk about delivering the right parts of the right story to the right audience, that's what it means. It's helpful to know who you're talking to and to meet their needs. And when it comes to stories, people really remember stories. There's a great book I'll recommend. It's called Made to Stick. It's written by these two guys who are Stanford professors of brothers. And they took their class and they separated them into two groups. And they had one group who said, all right, we're going to give you a piece of data, a piece of technical information, and have you share that information alone. And they gave the second group the same pieces of data and technical information, but they put it in the context of a story. And they wanted to see what the retention rate was for the audience or the people that they told. What did people remember? Well, the group who told just the data points, only 5% of that audience could remember any specific data point or anything. When it came to the people who told the stories, 63% remembered the stories. Because data on its own is rather cold. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. When you add the context of the story, data becomes meaningful. Data has value. And you can see this just about everywhere you go. And it's especially prevalent at someplace like an auction, where you've got two plates and they're exactly the same. But maybe the plate on the right, that was owned by George Washington way, way, way back ago. And that adds a little extra value to it. So the story or the meaning behind an object or whatever you're selling adds value. And so to put it to more in a business context, let's say you are a tire company and you offer a road hazard protection and you offer a 45,000 mile warranty. That's okay. That's great. It's good. It's helpful. But a customer is going to want to know, what's in it for me? Why should I care about that? How can that help me? And then you might want to tell the story of a flat tire and the story of how this guy was on his way to see his family and he just had a flat tire, had to pull over to the side of the road, and he wasn't sure what to do. And then he remembered he bought his tire from this national company and they had, garages all across the country. So he went online and found the garage that was close to him. And lucky enough, there was one just 2 miles down the road. And he had that road hazard protection. So a truck came and they picked him up and they took his car to the garage. And then the garage said, oh, wait, you've got this 45,000 mile warranty on you. So we're just going to pop these tires on you for free and you'll be on your way. And in 2 hours, this guy is on his way to see his family. And while we've shared the identical pieces of information, the warranty and the hazard protection, we've added a little bit more in the story. We've added one, that there's a website and it's searchable and it's really cool that you can find something that's close to you. But the more important part, the emotional part, is that you've added trust. You've added that this customer, your customers, your clients can rely on you to be there when they need you the most, and they're going to keep you moving and be there for you. So that's it. That's the value of story. That's the value add. And as I was saying before to Jackie, I am obsessed with process. So for me, creativity is a process. Writing music is a process. I'm able to sit down at 3:00 on a Tuesday. I'm not waiting for some sort of lightning to strike. I'm not waiting for luck or happenstance. And when you do things like writing a story or putting it together, you need to have some level of where to start. And so the three sections I break it down to: know your audience, structure your story, and then editing. Editing is everything. Remove the nice to know and keep what is needed. So we'll start with knowing your audience. And there's a great quote from Les Brown. And it says, don't let what you want to say get in the way of what your audience needs to hear. And what that means is keep them in mind. They're your customers. They're your clients. They're the ones you need to serve. You need to answer the questions. What do they need? What do they want? And what do they want to learn? So if you're speaking and you're a motivational speaker, what do they most want to learn? Set some goals. My friend Brian Fanzo says this all the time. He says, have some clear goals in mind. What do you want out of it? But then understand what they want out of it as well, and meet those needs along the way. And then when you're giving a presentation or a talk, maybe you're pitching a proposal, for example. Who's in the room? Know who's there. And maybe it's a mid-level researchers and maybe or mid-level marketers or salespeople, and they want to go into the details and find out what's going on. Or maybe it's more of a C-level person or an executive, and they really just want the top line. They want to get it quickly and understand how they can save money, how they can save time, how you can solve a problem for them. Because when you know your audience, you understand it is all about them and serving their needs. So know who's in the room. Also do a little research. Find out what they want. If they, if you're talking to somebody and you've got a proposal out or you're making an investment pitch, maybe find out a hobby of the person you're talking to and find something else to talk about in the room other than business. And maybe they play golf, or maybe they travel a lot. Find something in common and start a conversation. Finally, respect how much time they have. For example, I've got 45 minutes to talk here, so I'm going to talk for 5 minutes. I'm on for 90 and open it up. Same thing where you've got an executive who may not have more than 5 minutes. Take that time and show up and deliver what they need in the time they have allotted. And finally, them where they are. What's the best format? Understand, so if you've got a customer base that loves getting ads, but they only want them via email, not direct mail, send them their ads via email. Start that process. Or if your users want to connect on social media and have a conversation, make sure you show up there. Do a little research and understand where your audience is showing up, and you for them sure that you with them. Now, the next in the story process for me that's worked is to find a structure. And I worked with a guy, his name is Jack Weber. He's fantastic. And he told me the greatest stories. He said that he would often do a 7-question survey. It really could be any number of questions, but they would ask these questions, and then a junior researcher would quite often put a title page, put the 7 questions in order 1 through 7, and then put a conclusion page or a finding at the end. And that's not always the best way to tell a story. Maybe you want to start with your finding. Maybe you want to reorganize everything and find something interesting, because the finding you've got at the end might be the most interesting piece that somebody wants to know. And whatever structure you choose, you want to hook your audience in as quickly as possible. If you're on social media, you got about 3 seconds before somebody scrolls away from your TikTok post, from your Instagram post, or your Instagram reel. You should, if you're giving a speech, ask a question, engage them, find out what they want, or surprise them with an unexpected fact at the beginning of a talk. Something to hook them in that they are not expecting. Stories are great when they're simple, but they should have turns, and they should not be as expected as one might think. And if you want to engage them and keep them engaged throughout your whole talk, throughout your pitch, throughout your social media post. Finally, one other great way to do this is challenge perception. We used to do this all the time. We would go to marketing conferences, and there would be, 5 marketing myths that we would look, and we'd do some actual research on it, current research on it, and debunk it with data. And I refer to that as emotional perception versus data-driven reality. And it's a great framework to bounce back and forth. And an example that I use quite a bit is PowerPoint. There's a lot of hate for PowerPoint. A lot of people say it's the death of creativity. It's the root of all evil. Jeff Bezos banned it at Amazon. It's awful. I disagree, and the data kind of disagrees. In 2019, there was a study that showed that 35 million people give a PowerPoint presentation every day, and 500 million people view a PowerPoint presentation every single day. So somebody is using PowerPoint. And the question I often ask is, what can you do in Google Slides or Keynote or Prezi that you can't do in PowerPoint? And you can do some things faster in other programs, and you can do some things faster and better in PowerPoint. And there are some really cool features, and I'll give you some quick tips at the end as well. PowerPoint's gotten into morph slides and 3D objects that you can bring in. You can really do some cool things. So don't buy into emotional perception as much. Debunk theories. That's a nice way to set up a story. But there are some traditional story structures that work really well. And stories have been around since the dawn of time. Cavemen writing on walls, hieroglyphics. That's nothing new. It's the ways in which we communicate and tell those stories that continues to change. But the story structures are basically the same. So I'm going to start with in medias res or res. Sorry, I'm Americanizing the heck out of it. It really means start in the middle. And like we said before, you want to catch your audience. So if you watch a movie, this is that movie that starts with a big action scene, or the big scene where something exciting is going on and you have no idea what it is. And it says 24 hours earlier or 3 days earlier. And then you flash back and you figure out, okay, well, that happened at the beginning, and this is how this happened, and this is how we got to that point that we started the movie. Well, in a business setting, you can also use this story structure. We were doing a segmentation study, and we had maybe 5 seconds, but in one segment, millennials popped very unexpectedly for us and for our client. And so what we wound up doing was saying, well, let's start with that. I have a keyboard. I accidentally hit my keyboard during my gesture, but that happens. But let's start with that unexpected piece of information, like I was not expecting the keyboard. And then we'll go back and we'll look at the methodology, and we'll look at the qualitative work that we did and the quantitative work, and we'll meet to where we are. And then we'll say, what did we learn from all of that, and what should we do next? because every good story should mean something and have a meaning beyond, you know, just the facts. What did we learn? How can we apply that to our own lives? What does it mean to us as humans? So in medias res, great way to do it. It's a good way to do presentations. You hook an audience right in pretty quickly. Great way to do videos as well. Then there's a journalistic approach. This is more standard. This is going to be like an executive summary where you start off with all of the key takeaways, especially if an executive or somebody doesn't have a lot of time. This is a great way to go. It gets its roots from the newspaper industry where they have a limited number of column inches. And you might have heard of people, journalists writing just, focusing oh so hard on writing the best headline and writing that best, the best way they can tell a story in just a few sentences. Because what happens is if a story shows up later in the day and the editor has to add it, you may lose column inches from your story. And the editor doesn't have time to reread your story to make sure all of the bits are being told. So what they do is they lop it off from the end. That way, the top still has everything you need and you get into some detail as you go on. It's a good approach and it's quite often taken, but what it doesn't do very well is hold an audience interest, especially if you're giving a live presentation. So this is better for something like a white paper for a report. All right, so that's the journalistic headline. That's what I'm calling it, but it's really a journalism approach. Then there's this wonderful story structure called Sparklines. There is a person named Nancy Duarte. She is fantastic and has been in the storytelling and the presentation industry for decades. She is amazing. And she came up, she spent years analyzing different talks and storytelling and came up with this story structure. And it alternates between what is on those lower lines and what could be on those top lines. And you go back and forth and back and forth. And this is great if you're testing a new idea or releasing a new concept. And it's great if you're holding an audience attention in a presentation, in something live, because you're asking a question and then giving an answer or presenting a reality and saying, this is the way it is, and this is the way it could be. And the example Nancy always uses, she uses a couple examples, but she uses Steve Jobs when he first released the iPhone. And the iPhone changed the world. And before that, the mobile phone market was all right. Motorola was pretty big. They said, all right, this is the way the phones are today. But what if they could do this? That would be really, really cool. And then phones kind of do this. But if we could connect with our families and do this in such a different way, I think that would be amazing. And they really do this. And he kept going back and forth and back and forth. And then he ended up by saying, you know what? Everything that sounded like a dream, that sounded like what we really want, that's what I'm giving you today. That's what's available right now in the iPhone. And just blew everybody's mind, changed the world. So that's what you can do when you tell an effective story using a story structure. And I saved it to the last, the hero's journey. It's something that people know. They just know it. Everybody's heard of it. Sometimes it's represented like this, sometimes in a circular fashion where you start at 12 o'clock and you go around clockwise. And it's very similar to even the emotional cycle of change that we talked about at the beginning. You start off on the left and you sort of set up the world as quickly as possible before you get to what is called an inciting incident. And that's the part of the story where somebody goes, it was all going okay until one day this happened. And then you set off on an adventure. Your hero, your protagonist goes off and they're going to encounter obstacles on the way. And those are the times when that line goes down a little bit. And at some point, somebody, like we talked about before, a mentor, somebody's going to come in with a little piece of advice. P.S. Why it's important to share your story. Come in with a little piece of advice to get our hero through their roadblock, through whatever is happening to them, and move on to the next part of the story. And this happens, and this keeps happening, and keeps happening until we reach a climax and the hero finally either achieves their goal or fails miserably. Something happens, and then there's a denouement, an ending, and everything wraps up. And I got to thinking about this, and we love the hero's journey, and we love seeing it. We see it in so many different places. And I think part of what we love is the familiarity of it. And we see it, it's on so many shows we see. So all of the procedurals, for example, Law and Order, it's CSI, all of those things. we're familiar with how it goes, how what happens and the structure, or it's a Hallmark movie. We're familiar with how those go. My brother literally sets his watch by the different events of a Hallmark movie, and he knows when he's about 20 minutes out and it's going to end. He can set his watch, and there's going to be some sort of fight between, the couple. And we enjoy that. It gives us a sense that we've been there before, but there's something new that we're going to learn when we go on this specific journey. And I got to thinking, like, wow, what also, there's another place that tells great stories, and that is music. And I got to thinking, well, what are some of the parallels that could be drawn here? And so I sat down at the keyboard and I started playing the chords. And I actually wound up seeing very recently a comedy bit by a group called the Axis of Awesome. And I'm not sure, I don't think they're still together, but this was a 2012 video that I had seen. And they talked about saying, well, they're a musical comedy bit. So why didn't we become successful as a band is the question they ask. And they say, oh, we never did a 4-chord song. And they play these 4 chords. It's a 1, 5, 6 minor, down to a 4. And you can kind of hear as it goes, it sounds very much like a tension and release. And I'm not playing very well in talking, but that's how it goes. All of these songs that you see behind you have that same chord structure, and it's very familiar, but yet something's a little bit different. And what you find is that chord structure follows very similarly to a hero's journey, where there's tension, where you set up the world, and then something goes wrong, something that's an inciting incident. And then you get to the high point of the moment, and it's resolved, and it's tension and release again. You go right back to the beginning, and you're going up, and then something happens again, and you get through that challenge, and then you resolve it. And what you do is you realize that there are so many of these little moments and these little stories, that great stories aren't just one story. They're little stories that add up to an epic tale. That's running around in my head, and at the very least wanted to share it with you. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is editing. It is everything. If it is not necessary for the story, it is necessary that you take it out. That is a quote from Les Brown, but it really is. You've got to remove what is not needed and keep what is needed. And I'll give you an example of how I visually run through a slide. I made all of this up. This is sort of just an example slide here, but these are some example company features. And as I'm looking at this, I'll say to myself, all right, well, here are sort of the top 10, the top company features that we've got. But there's a big break in the data. So I'm going to, you want to have one idea per slide, focus on that. But then there's a big break in the data below 62. It jumps down to 45 and everything down below. That's all right. But if you're looking at the top features, well, it's going to be these 5. And if you look a little bit closer, the membership is what seems to pop quite significantly above the other 4. So that seems to be really important. So when you're telling a slide and when you're giving a presentation, you want your visuals to match the story that you want to tell. So you might do something like this, where you highlight the top feature and you say, wow, people love the Outermost Ring membership. They think it's the greatest thing in the world. To round out the top 5, here are the remaining things. It's online, consulting, online training, one-to-one coaching. They're really excited, but they really do love the feature. Then we found out, as we broke it out by age, that people among 18 to 35-year-olds really enjoy the online training. And it adds a little bit of extra insight, but you lead somebody's eye, you use your slide as a visual aid rather than telling the entire story. And you can put that other information, you can put it in an appendix or you can give it later, but you're not cluttering up your stage. Because the one thing I will say is that if you are presenting live, nobody is listening to you until they're done reading your slide. It's just not happening. They're processing all of that information. They're half listening to you maybe, but they're really reading your slide. They're looking for a mistake. They're looking for a double space. I guarantee you one person in the audience is always looking for that. So keep that in mind. When you try to use slides, if you use them during a presentation, don't use something that you might deliver as a deliverable, a standalone deliverable that needs to have the entire story in it. You, the presenter, you are the storyteller. You are taking them on this journey with you, and you are their guide. So when we get to a little more about editing, take a pass through. Make sure you're making an emotional connection as you've told your story, because the best stories engage the senses. I won a trip. I was very lucky in the mid 90s to win a trip to London, Paris, and Rome. It was for 11 days. I won it off of the radio. It was a call-in thing, and I just happened to win. And it was for 11 days. I wound up staying for 11 weeks. But, I could tell a story of how I had breakfast in Paris and walked along the Seine and saw the Eiffel Tower. That's an okay story. But what if I told the story of how I could still taste that buttery croissant in my mouth and feel the oil on my fingers? And as I walked out of that restaurant that morning, I could hear the Seine rolling through Paris, and I could almost smell the fog that was coming along. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a bike just crossed my path, and I turned to see what had happened. And there it was, this incredible monument that I'd only seen in pictures before. And I was standing at the base of the Eiffel Tower. And that's a moment. And that's the difference between telling a story and engaging the senses. You put an audience in that moment. You bring them with you on the journey. So make sure you're making an emotional connection and moving beyond the story to bring them into your story. And the last part, find the funny. Be yourself on stage. A lot of people get nervous. It is a very real thing. I think it's something like 75%, and we'll talk about that in just a second. 75% of people get nervous. Find the funny and be yourself. Something invariably will go wrong during just about anything live. I was talking with Jackie before this started, and I'm going to share with you that I did the age-old thing of muting myself and talking, which is, it had to happen at least once. I'm, thankful it happened before we started recording, but it happened. So it's going to happen. It's what you do next that matters. And when you're also editing, as I said before, stick to one idea per slide. Keep it simple, especially if you're presenting. You want to make sure you move the people along in the direction that you want them to go. It should be easily understood in 5 seconds. If they're spending more than that reading your slide, they are definitely not listening to you, and it really should be a visual aid behind you. You can even put just a picture up. So I could have put a picture up. If I was telling that story of Paris, I could have put a picture up of the Eiffel Tower. That's it. And then I'll tell the story. And it kind of puts you in the moment, but that adds a visual. That would have been a really nice thing. I wasn't really planning on telling that story, but that's how it could go. And then here are a few PowerPoint tips for those. Even if you hate PowerPoint, here's a great one. Repurpose the notes pages. So for example, if I'm talking about, as I mentioned, the fear of public speaking, which is called glossophobia, 75% of people, and it's a ballpark number, it's actually probably not correct anymore, suffer from the fear of public speaking. I want to present to that because there's not a lot on stage. So I'm going to add the context. I'm the speaker who's going to add that. You can actually redesign the notes pages and update the template. So if you wanted to leave a printed handout with everything that you're going to say, put that there and then leave that behind for people to view. And that way you're using the PowerPoint medium for how it's actually supposed to be used. It's supposed to be a visual aid to you, the presenter. Then another one that they released, I don't know, it wasn't too long ago, or at least I didn't find out about it too long ago. But if you're using the online version, the collaborative version of Microsoft Office, which is PowerPoint for the web or Word for the web, you can actually take a Word for the web document and export to a PowerPoint presentation. And not just a PowerPoint presentation, a designed PowerPoint presentation. If you were to click on this button, it gives you like 9 options of designs. It reads what's in your PowerPoint document, and hopefully you've structured it at least in an organized way. And it will automatically spit out not only suggestions. So if I'm talking about music, it might give me some musical suggestions from design, but then it'll give me a designed PowerPoint based on the content of my Word document. So hopefully I would say if you're using, Word for the web, try it out. It's a cool trick. Finally, as I mentioned before, 3D models are in PowerPoint and they're cool and they're easy and they've given you a lot of starter models. I did this in about 10 minutes. I created an entire room, a virtual environment, and I made a little 3D version of my logo as well. But you can have things hop around on stage, on cue, and you can just find different ways to elevate your presentation beyond what people might expect. Because one of those wonderful things to keep an audience engaged is to surprise them. Lastly, I want to leave you with some links. So I had that moving tail up when I was talking about Nancy Duarte and Sparklines. Moving Tail is actually the podcast that I host. And you can find it at amovingtail.com. We talk all about storytelling. We've had some great guests actually going to have Nancy. We just booked her for a December interview. So subscribe now so you don't miss it. Nancy will hopefully be on in December. We've got, I interviewed Justin Guarini from American Idol. He has an amazing story to tell, and we talked quite a bit about storytelling. And I would recommend checking out Nancy's books. Data Story and Slideology are the ones that helped me out the most, but she's got a bunch of books. She just came out with one called Presenting Virtually. And head to duarte.com if you want to learn more about that. And then Made to Stick. Chip Heath, Dan Heath, those are the brothers who I mentioned before about that study that they did. Those are the teachers. Anyway, that's what you can do if you're looking to do something right now today. Or you can reach out to me, outermostring.com, and we can talk a little bit more. But the thing I'll leave you with is this. Seek out the stories in your life. Stories happen every day. We write another page in our story every single day. So what are you doing to move your story along? And I will say this, if we're seeking something that's bad or something that's negative, we're going to find it. If we're seeking joy, seeking something positive, we're going to find that. I literally have made my own lined journal called the Journal of Joy. I started writing down those stories in that because I'm seeking joy. But I'll share this one last story and then we'll wrap things up. I went to the post office. It was last Friday. And I was dropping off packages for my wife. And as I was going in, I saw a guy outside. He was in full biker gear and had a bicycle with him. But he was taking a picture. It's about 5 o'clock, taking a picture of the moon. It was still kind of light out. So it was a really cool shot. And he was still there and just sort of packing up as I was walking out. And I stopped and I said, wow, that was really cool. You stopped and took a picture of the moon. Because I often do that. I stop and look at the ocean. I stop and look at the water. I stop to see something cool in nature. And we got to talking, and apparently he's taken a picture of a sunset and a picture of a sunrise every day for the last 5 years. And he said, hey, I'll sign you up for my email list. And we found some other things in common as well, some theater things. It seemed a little weird, but you know what? I think we were meant to meet. And that was that unexpected thing. I could have just kept going to my car, but I said, you know what? Let me break the routine. Let me talk to this person and find out a little bit more. And all week long, I've been getting these amazing pictures that have inspired me and fulfilled me of sunsets and animals that are around town. And you never know what's going to happen when you break your routine and you head off on an adventure. So seek the stories in your life and always tell the right parts of the right stories to the right audience. Thank you so much. I hope you've had a good time. And my hope is that you've learned at least one thing that you didn't know before and can bridge that gap or help a little bit to bridge that gap between storytelling and business. Any questions? I'm open to whatever. I'll play music while we're waiting.
That's great. Right. There's no questions as of right now, but as Kevin said, if anybody has questions, type them in the chat box.
I used to play a piano bar. It was years ago. I actually got my favorite moment was I got a $20 tip to play my way. And I just had so many fun times playing piano bars. But my skills playing piano decrease significantly when I'm talking. But I will try. Thank you, David. That's all that. Hopefully you're able to use this. Hopefully you can take this and maybe apply even one thing. And let me get back. Jose, did I answer your question? How to engage customers during home presentations? A very different thing. So you'll notice I'm sitting down, but I've done radio. I did that for years, and there's a certain energy. 2 suggestions for doing home presentations. Stand up. 1. 2, know the percentage of people who are going to be on mobile versus the percentage of people that are going to be watching on a laptop or a desktop, because that's going to dictate your screen size. You might want to limit, if you're going to have a lot of mobile users, your screen is going to be about this big. So limit a lot of detail on slides. Keep it simple. Keep it big words like questions. And then you yourself make sure you add the context as the presenter or the storyteller. Hopefully that answers your question. Thanks for the inspiration. Wonderful. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. How can we get the recording? Talk to Jackie. Jackie should be here. The recording should be available, I don't know, sometime soon because you signed up.
Yes.
So you're in it.
Yes, absolutely. We will get the recording. It is being recorded right now. And we will get the recording out to everybody once we download it from the cloud and add it to our YouTube channel. We will be sending an email to everybody who attended today directly from this session, and then also sending an email to all of our accredited businesses and non with links to all of the sessions. So you'll be able to go back and watch again. Kevin, this was inspirational. I absolutely enjoyed it. I know many people in the chat are commenting right now. Great presentation. Thank you so much. I know my staff has been enjoying it. So I really appreciate this. I think all will take something back that we can utilize.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And have a great day. And what's coming up next? We have another presentation, yeah?
We do. There is one final session of our Better Business Summit 2021. At 2:00, you can join us for a panel discussion on your future customer, marketing your business in 2021 and beyond. And we will be joined on that panel discussion. It will be moderated by our own Better Business Bureau CEO, Paulette Scarpetti. And we will be joined by the general manager and president of NBC Connecticut and Telemundo. Her name is Diane. Also, John Fuller, the president and CEO of Full Power Radio, who has multiple radio stations across the state, including 1029 The Whale, WDRC, and many others. And also Victoria Matsherd from Outfront Media. So that's a out-of-home billboard company. So we will be talking with them about different types of media and what that looks like going into the future. So if you have not registered yet, please pop over to betterbusinesssummit.com. You can still register for that final session. And again, thank you, Kevin, so much. Have a great day, everyone.